Heidi ho, folks. This is Earthy Wise Woman. It has been so long since I have made a video. I don't even remember the last time. It's been that long. I'm gonna adjust this a little. Um, but life has a tendency of getting in the way of pursuits, and in my case, I am currently in a household that is extremely hectic. And because of that reason, it's very difficult for me to find a quiet moment just to sit down and have a chat. So I have a moment. So I'm going to have a chat. And I hope you guys all had a great holiday and looking forward to a uneventful new year, even though I've got to tell you honestly, um, my guides and the cards do not show an uneventful new year. In fact, it shows an extremely, very intense year coming up. So, that being the case, I am going to strongly suggest to you that you surround yourself with a great deal of love and light and positivitiness. Is there such a word? Because it's going to be a bumpy ride. It really is. I'm going to strongly suggest to all of you listen to that inner voice. Stockpile food, blankets, firewood. You're going to need it. Trust me, you're going to need it. Mm-mm. All that being said, today I would like to discuss folk magic and what folk magic means and how it's evolved. Okay? First of all, folk magic, another word for it should be regional magic. The reason I say regional is because um, folk magic popped up in areas. Um, and in a way, it was we as practitioners did what we had to do with what we had available to us. So if some of us lived in areas that, say, didn't have certain copal, we use whatever we had. And what copal is, I did this in a previous video, but what it is tree sap. So in one area of the world or in the United States, I'm in the United States, right? I use that one as an example. We might have maple wood, and we'll get the sap from the maple wood along with the syrup. But in another tree, we might have a lot of oak, whereas another region of the world there might be a lot of ash. Um, so you get the idea. So as a practitioner, you use what you had available. All right. My my paternal grandmother used to work a lot with beans. She would use black beans um, in a lot of her magical work. Now, today, right now, it was New Year's Day. So, in honor of tradition and magical, as a practitioner, I made a pot of black eyed peas. Now, black eyed peas brings good luck in the new year. Um, because you can see into it and foresee the new year, and it is a form of good luck and voodoo. But that's folk magic because black eyed peas didn't grow everywhere. So other people had different traditions in bringing in the new year, depending on what they had available. I know in Hawaii they don't have black eyed peas, but they do eat a certain fish to bring in the new year. So that's a part of folk magic. Now, I think that what has happened over the decades is that folk magic has become not so recognized as it used to be. I mean, we say the word folk magic, but it's not as regional as it used to be. Not at all. Um, my grandmother told me that back when she was a little girl, so I'm 56. So if we're talking about my grandmother, we're talking about the turn of the last century. So she was always a candle maker. But back then, they did not have colored candles. So when my grandmother made a candle to the ancestors, she would literally go down to the graveyard, get some dirt, and add it to the wax, which, by the way, was not paraffin wax or soy wax. My grandmother worked a lot with beeswax, and she worked with beeswax because her father was a beekeeper, so they had beeswax. So colors were not a part of that. Not till later. Not till later. But she would add the burial dirt to the beeswax when she was crafting her candle. And that was her candle to the ancestors. All right. And as time has gone on, colors have come into the making of candles. So now we add blue candles for healing. However, in other regions, when it is a disease of the blood, say something like leukemia or any other blood related lymphoma, I believe, um, they will use a red candle because it is a blood disease, and that's regional. But we would use a blue candle for healing. And then came the concept of shades of blue. Um, some practitioners use light blue for healing. Some would use, if it's something that they felt was a very radical disease, they would use royal blue. Again, this is regional. Some use green for healing. Why green? Because they felt it was closer to Mother Earth. Again, regional. So I think the one thing I find a little bit sad is that we have lost some of the traditions of our folk magic. And most of them have been lost because of the internet. I mean, everything is put up on the internet. So instead of, I don't know, going to your local, which I don't think they have anymore, your local wise woman and getting a spell or advice, you go to the internet. And people are very rigid on those colors. And in a way, we kind of lose something in that because there are certain things I do now as a practitioner, going back to some of my grandmother roots that a lot of people don't do anymore. It's me returning back to the folk magic. My grandmother, again, my paternal grandmother, since she did not have color like candle dye, we didn't, candle dye is something that became commercially available to the people probably in the mid um, 1950s, I would say. It became much more commercially available. So people, when they did, practitioners made their candles, they could go out and buy candle wax. But candle wax was not always available to us. Not the dye. The candle wax dye was not always available. So what a lot of people did was they didn't use candle dye. But when it did become available, what we did was some of those who lived in more metropolitan areas, we did it. But then some of us were poor. And when I became much more of a practicing practitioner, that even practicing practitioner? But I am a hereditary witch. So when I say practicing, I was born into witchcraft. But when I begin to practice witchcraft very wholeheartedly, and I started writing in my grimoire, I didn't have the money to buy candle wax, candle dye. That stuff is expensive. It still is. So, what I used to dye my candles was Crayola crayons because a package of crayons was cheap. All right. And believe me when I say, one of the best things for a practitioner is to be creative with their magic because it does open up your creativity, which makes your magic so much more powerful. I'd rather pour a red candle and like break crayons up to get just the shade I want, as opposed to going to a magical shop and buying a red candle. Because here's the question that I want you guys to ask yourself, and you'll understand why I say what I say. When does your magical spell start? I'm going to ask that again. When does the magical spell that you are crafting and casting, when does it start? Now, most of us would say, well, it starts when I get all my materials together and I'm ready to practice and start and do my spell magic. But, now just hear me out. When you have to craft the candle, when you have to pour the wax, when you have to crush the herbs, when you have to find the perfect jar to pour the candle in, when you have to melt the wax and stir the wax, that's when the magic really starts. Okay? Now, don't misunderstand me. I am not putting down going out and buying a red candle. I've bought color candles all the time. However, when you have an opportunity to pour your own candle, you are literally putting in the work to cast that candle. It started the very moment you started figuring out how you're going to craft the candle. That is when that spell started. Now, a lot of people, they get too rigid. I mean, they get rigid. And that's where the folk magic wasn't. Folk magic was never rigid because you couldn't be rigid because you were limited on the materials you could use. So you couldn't be rigid. You had to be creative. All right? So, in these days and times right now we're dealing with, a lot of people are broke. I'm serious. Let's keep it real. A lot of people don't have a lot of money. So a lot of you are like saying, well, Earthy Wise Woman, I ain't got a lot of money. I need to cast this spell. I ain't got the money to buy this and buy that and buy. Okay. But you know what you do have? You have libraries. Now, you might ask, well, what's that got to do with anything? And you do have the internet. I would challenge you to create with what is around you physically. Take walks. And when you're taking these walks, talk to your guides. Look at things. Look at things around you. And what do they bring about in your magical self? It's like when my grandson outgrew his blue jeans. And I'm looking at these little boy blue jeans. They're so cute. But they're too small for him. And I don't like to waste. So I'm looking at these little jeans and I don't want to waste them because I know another child could wear them. So I came to a happy compromise. I cut off the legs because they had a little hole in them. Anyway, excuse me, I knocked the table. They had a hole in the knee. So I cut off the legs and I hemmed them, made them into a pair of shorts. But I kept the part that I cut off and I made into a spirit doll. And I made into a doll. I sewed it. And all my spirit dolls, I believe in sewing by hand. I made it into a spirit doll and, excuse me, and I put on it some, he had some little, like, I guess it's paint, little acrylic paint. Boy used to always spill paint. I took the doll and I dipped it in the spilled paint that he had spilled and wiped it up. And then I drew a little face on and everything. And I set it on my altar. And every day I looked at it. And it made me feel whimsical, childlike. And I realized, I like this doll because this doll brings out the whimsy in me, makes me creative. Because children are creative. They don't know the boundaries that we are given as adults. They know the creativity. And so I did that. I made it, I crafted it, I left it on my altar. And I still have it for creativity. I did give it to my grandson so that he would have his doll when he went to his first day of school. And I'm glad I did that because he still has that doll. And now he's 11. So, he has it he always, whenever he gets a new backpack, he puts the doll in his backpack, which is great. But the point I'm trying to get at is that a lot of people would have said, well, you went out and bought him that. And no, I put the energy work in it and I made it for him. The greatest energy work you can do is being creative with your magic. Don't be too quick to buy. Be slow to buy, quick to create. Because in doing that, you are creating your own folk magic. All right? So if you feel compelled to go outside and just pick some grass and put it on your altar because grass reminds you of something, then do it. There is no wrong thing to do. Now, I have studied very structured magic by reading books, but I've also walked on the folk magic side by listening to my guides and looking at the region of what grows around me. And I've been lucky enough to have people give me information. Hold on one second.